Hello, everyone. Hopefully. Let's see if we're live. I'm sure we'll be live in a minute. Anyway, hi, my name is Joe. I am a developer educator at Twilio. My pronouns are he and him. And I am here today to talk to y'all about, well, first of all, about Twilio and the challenges that we have going on at Global Hack Week in it. And then also, in general, this little thing called REST APIs and how they can help us in our development journey and the role they play in our web applications and in making the internet go. So as soon as I get past the ads on Twitch to make sure that I am in fact coming through, let me know if you can hear me in chat. That would be wonderful. And otherwise I will kick off. So you have me here for I think the next 2-ish hours. I see in Discord someone saying, is there an announcement regarding this event? Let's tell everyone we're live. Let's go. Perfect. Awesome. Hey folks, welcome in. Cool. So for the next 2-ish hours, we are going to be taking a look at the challenges, and we're doing something a little bit different with this Global Hack Week with the Twilio challenges. We are going a bit higher level, and so this workshop is to kick that off. We're going to be talking about APIs, how they work, how you can use them, how they benefit you, and the different ways that you can engage with an API. And then that will help us approach the Twilio challenges this week, which are all about learning and using APIs, as the Twilio API is an example, but using them in a different set of circumstances. So, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about Twilio. So if you haven't heard of us before, throw me some words in chat if you've used or heard of Twilio before. But if you haven't, Twilio is a cloud communication service provider, so we offer a bunch of APIs, and we'll talk about what those are in a minute, to help you build communications into your applications. So we have APIs to help you build in WhatsApp and SMS, so like mobile phone messaging, so you can make, you can build an app that sends messages to people, or, you may, when you logged into Twitch today, you may have got sent a SMS with your 2-factor authentication code, for example. Twilio has APIs to enable that. We have what we call programmable voice, so you can make phone calls or video calls, all these kind of things. So you can, again, like you could build a call center. So, when you call up a call center or a helpline and you get kind of like the robot menu where you have to press different buttons to navigate it, you can build one of those with Twilio. Or you can do any number of things that rely on phoning someone or having people phone each other. You could build like a conference call app, that kind of stuff. Zoom is a really good example. When you create a new meeting on Zoom, you get a conference line as well as the application line so people can dial in. You could build that with Twilio. We have video and live streaming, so as well as having things that happen on mobile phones, you can build video chat apps on your browser and over the internet. And we have emails, so you can send and receive emails, all kinds of great things. We now also have Segment, which is a customer analytics platform, which is super useful. But today, this week, we're mostly going to be looking at our communications APIs. So that's enough about kind of an intro to Twilio. If you are participating in the daily challenges, which I expect you are, you can find out all about them in this handy GitHub repo that we've thrown together for you this time around. I'll drop that in the chat. The GitHub repo. So here's the thing I've done a little bit different this time, chat. So in previous Global Hack Weeks and Local Hack Days, we've kind of given like the little challenge, but I got the sense that folks wanted a little bit more instruction, a little bit more tutorialization. So all of our daily challenges this time come with a little tutorial, and that's what's in this GitHub repo. So in this repo, in the README, you will find a description of every daily challenge and then the steps to complete that daily challenge. So this whole week we have got you covered as you're going about the Twilio challenges. Every step of the way we have a tutorial to walk you through how to complete that challenge. So I was about to say all 7 days are covered. I haven't finished writing up day 6 and day 7 yet, or day 5 apparently. I definitely wrote that. Evidently, I just haven't pushed it. I will finish day 5, day 6, and day 7 before you get to them. Don't you worry. But all of the challenges have a nice tutorial in here. In terms of submitting the challenges, you do that the exact same way you submit all the other challenges this week, which is to go to mlh.io, and then you go to the challenges menu, and from here you get the submission link, and all of the Twilio challenges are submitted through the dev post links as normal. So if I come to the challenge page, I will find the Twilio challenge. Today's challenge is getting ready to hack with Twilio. It's day 1, so we want you to get set up to hack for the rest of the week. And you'll see here there's a dev post link where you can submit the challenge to the day 1 init day 1 dev post. This is init 2023. I did put init 2022 in all the documentation. I'm very sorry. This is for the correct year. Do not be alarmed. So when you submit to the dev post, yes, you can get the dev post link right here. But again, just to mention, although all of our tutorial is in this GitHub README, you get access to the README each day and the dev post link from the standard MLH init page. All of the information that you need will always be in this page. Every day there will be a new Twilio daily challenge in here, and it will link to the section of the guide. So right now it links to day 1. Tomorrow it will link to day 2. So all the information you need is on the init.mlh.io challenges page. And then every day you'll get your little tutorial. So today, the day 1 challenge is getting set up and ready to complete the challenges for the rest of the week, which will get you set up with a Twilio account, to get your account upgraded. We have a really exciting new thing this time around. If you have hacked with us before, you may have encountered the problem, especially if you're in a country like India, where it's difficult to test your Twilio applications because you have to call like a United States mobile number, and that's expensive. We have a new thing now called the Twilio Dev Phone, which basically means that you can use 2 Twilio numbers instead of 1 Twilio number, and you get a virtual simulated phone in your browser. And so it will cost you nothing this week to test your Twilio apps. And you can use the Dev Phone and 2 Twilio numbers, 1 Twilio number to test, 1 Twilio number for your applications. And it will be much easier than it has been in the past. So if you've hacked with us in a previous local hack day and you found it difficult to get involved because of lack of like a local number, give it another go this time, because we've got this fancy browser-based phone for you that uses your Twilio account, and it's all set up with everything you need to test your Twilio apps. And so the tutorial will be using this all the way along. So that is it for our weekly challenges. Let's get into talking about REST APIs. And why are we talking about chat? Sorry, I'm also reading chat. Challery says, how do we find the Twilio specific challenges? There isn't a category or anything at the top, but let me show you a little web browser superpower. If you press Control F on your browser, or Command F if you're on a Mac, it will open the search bar, and then you can just type Twilio, and then you can find anything on the page that you want to find. And this will work for any text on the page, any sponsor. If you want to find Wix, there you go. So hit that page, search Twilio, and you will find the Twilio challenges, as well as the daily challenge. We have a Twilio Quest competition going all week. And if you haven't seen Twilio Quest is awesome. It is our free game that helps you learn to code. You can play Twilio Quest with us this week, and as long as you complete at least 1 mission, you can submit the daily challenge. And by the end of the week, we'll be giving the top 5 players a prize. So, alrighty. Let us get into REST APIs. So why are we talking about REST APIs? So first of all, you've probably heard that term everywhere. It's very common, especially with a lot of the sponsors at MLH. Lots of them are API providers, and Twilio is no different. If you haven't heard that term, I am here to introduce you to it. And actually, let me get a little resource from Twilio, because Twilio has a really good blog post on it. Well, really good reference doc, and I'll throw that into the chat for folks who prefer to read along as we explain. So let's start with an API. An API is an acronym that stands for Application Programming Interface. Really easy way to think about that is whenever you write a piece of software, whenever you create an app, whether it's a piece of JavaScript on your computer, whether it's a website, whether it is a mobile app, whether it's a shell script, whatever it is, chances are that application, that piece of code, is going to want to communicate with other pieces of code, right? Especially if if you imagine you're writing a website, or you've got an application where you have users logging in to that application, right? So people are going to come log into your app. They're going to have a username and a password. There's probably a situation in which you are going to, at some point, want to give that login information to another service. Maybe it's to your front end of your application. Maybe it's something else. But you might want to exchange information with something else. At these points where different programs go and interact with other programs is the application programming interface. So it's the way that a piece of software makes its functionality accessible to another piece of software. And this doesn't just mean websites. Whenever you import a library into your code, or whenever you, go and, so for example, let's look up the Axios NPM library. So Axios is a library in the Node JavaScript ecosystem, which is a HTTP client. So it's a library for making HTTP requests to websites. And this is a library. You download this and you import it into your project, and this gives you functionality that you can use. This is still an API. This isn't a website that I'm going to. This isn't a database that I'm querying, but the set of functions that this library gives me to use in my code is its application programming interface. Axios is a thing which goes and makes HTTP requests to websites, and it exposes to me, the programmer, a set of functions which I can use to make it do that. So, great question from Challery. Is every API a REST API? No. Axios, what we're looking at here, these set of functions that Axios exposes to me is not a REST API. This is just its application programming interface. When we talk about REST APIs, we are talking about a specific set of APIs that follow what's called the representational state transfer architecture. That means a whole lot of things, and a lot of it doesn't matter if you are a consumer of an API. And what do I mean by a consumer of an API? I mean someone who you just want to use an API that you found on the internet. You're not building the API, right? You just want to use it. If you're a consumer, a lot of what makes a REST API doesn't necessarily matter to you, because ultimately REST APIs are just a way of structuring your software. Just a way of deciding how you're going to build your application and how it's going to work. But what they do mean to us as a consumer is that we can expect it to work in a certain way. And specifically, REST APIs are web APIs. So here, this Axios API here, I'm going to use this in my code as a library. This is not a web API. This is a library which has a set of functions I can use. So it's not a REST API. It's not a web API either. But if I were to go to a website and send it a HTTP request and get some data back, that is a web API. And if it follows certain standards, it may be a REST API. So that's a many-layered cake. Let's go to Excalidraw and talk about this. I don't know how this is going to work. We're going to do some whiteboarding, and you're going to let me know if it's remotely legible. Can you see this box? It looks like you can see this box. Okay, let's tidy up the sloppiness of it. How's that? That looking good, chat? Can we see the box? I think we can see the box. Cool. Okay, so web APIs. Let's talk about what a web application looks like and how a web application works and why it might have an API. So when you go to a website, you will, so say for example, I go to www.google.com. What I'm going to get is a web page, and that web page is going to have, it's going to be my Google. It's going to have the Google logo, and there's going to be a little search bar here. This little thing is what we call the front. Oh, no, I'm not going to try and handwrite. That's going to be terrible. That is the front end, right? This is the front of the application. It's what your users are exposed to. You could also call this the client. So this is what I, as the user, see of the application. This is my client. This is how I interact with Google. I go to Google and I've got the search bar. How does this front end work? How does this get here? Well, somewhere there is going to be a backend. And this backend is going to be what we would call a server. So when you hear about servers, this is probably what this is. And this backend is going to be communicating with Google, with the front end. So there's a couple of ways that that communication happens. So first of all, let's imagine how this web page gets here. So when I go to my browser bar and I type in google.com and I press enter, my browser sends a HTTP request. If you haven't heard of a HTTP request before, you've probably seen it at the front of all your URLs when you type in HTTP. It is it's the hypertext transfer protocol. It is the protocol that makes information exchange on the internet work. So basically your browser is a HTTP client, I guess, that sends a request to a web server and gets some content back. So when we go to our browser and we type http google.com and we press enter, our request goes through the internet, goes through all the machines, eventually lands on a Google server and says, hey, Joe on Firefox has just asked for the contents of this address. Can you please give it to them? And so the Google server returns the HTML and the other contents of this web page to our browser. So we see this in our browser. And it's usually going to be HTML, JavaScript, that kind of stuff, because that's what our browser renders, right? So that's coming from the server. This is our server here. That's one way that the server interacts with the front end, right? When we first make our request to get a website, we get served the website. But when I'm on Google, if I go to Google and I type in great cats, something happened there, right? Did you see that page load? So that page loaded and we've got new information. So at this point, we've kind of done the same thing. So I've put in some information on here. I've used the search bar on Google. And so at that point, this application has had to go back to the server with, some data, my search query, and then the server has done something with it and sent it back to the client. So this part is where REST APIs, you might be able to hear my washing machine beeping. I'm really sorry if you can. This part is where web APIs become super relevant to us, because web APIs at this point are one of the ways that this front end might communicate with the back end. Because when we make a request to google.com from our browser, it is serving us the graphical user interface. It's serving us the Google web page. But when the Google web page itself, that thing in our browser, wants to get some information from the Google server to update it to show us our query, it's probably doing a lighter weight form of data transfer. It's probably just saying, hey, this person searched for cats, give me the info on cats, and sending it back and forth. And we can actually see that in action. So if I go back to Google, you have probably seen or heard of the inspector. So you can right click any web page and click inspect, and that brings you up these developer tools down here. And the developer tools let us look at the HTML of the page, but a really cool thing about the developer tools is the network inspector. And this actually lets us see what network requests are happening on this page when we interact with it. So you can see here, we've got all these status codes, we've got these methods, and we've got these domains and files. These methods are the HTTP requests. HTTP being the protocol that data is moved around on the internet. There are different HTTP methods, and we'll talk about those. These are really important for REST. But the important ones here are get and post. Really simple. A get method is saying, hey, give me some data. And a post method is saying, I have some data, I'm giving it to you. So one is receiving data, the other is sending data. So we can see here, for example, when I search for great cats, that we get a bunch of network requests get fired. And a lot of these are not super relevant. So you can see that a lot of them are red because my ad blocker is blocking them, because they're things to serve ads and whatever. But some of these will be the actual web page itself communicating with the Google server in order to actually provide us the content that we've asked for. I couldn't tell you which ones they are, but the important thing is you can see the client, the web page, communicating with the server, right? Does that make sense? Is everyone following me so far? Have I raised any questions? We have 2 hours together here, folks. So please feel like you can ask questions we've got plenty of time. We can do tangents. We can do whatever you want, and I want to make sure that everyone is following as we go. So this is a web API that we're seeing in action here, right? We are seeing an application that has a front end and a back end, and the way those two parts are talking, the way the front end is getting the data to show us, the user, is via an API to the back end. But that is how you might use an API between your own parts of your website to build it. But we as developers, as hackers, we're often going to be going to other APIs. And so sometimes we are not actually, when we are just going to get data without necessarily having a use case for it. So for example, here is a fun little API. You won't be able to get to this. This is an API on my local network that's actually connected to the solar panels on my roof. So if I go to this API, I get just a little bit of information. So this address, envoy.local/API/v1/production, it has no user interface. It has no website. What this has actually returned to me is not HTML, but it is just, it's being wrapped in HTML, but it is just a JSON object. JSON, if you haven't encountered it, is JSON. It's the JavaScript object notation. It's just a way of encoding data. It's in key value pairs. So you have like the variable and then the value. And this is what you'll see a lot of when you use APIs. When you go to someone else's API, like the GitHub API or the Twilio API, or some of the APIs that we'll use as a demo in a minute, what you will usually get back from them when you ask for data is you will get back that data in the JSON format. And so this is an API that is coming from a little device that's in my electricity cupboard, and it tells me how much watts my solar panels are generating right now. So if I wanted to do something like, I don't know, hook up a meter on my wall that told me how much solar panel power we have, I could make a little application that just went to this API, got this JSON object, and had a look at the watts now, and there we go. That would work straight away. And I can do this, for example, in my terminal with an application called Curl. As soon as I shut down the web phone. Okay, I'm going to go turn off this washing machine because the beeping is driving me mad. I hope you can't hear it. I will be back in 2 minutes. In the meantime, I'll leave up this amazing description, and you can read this bit and make sure it aligns with your understanding while I go turn off a washing machine. And we're back. Okay. Alrighty. We have some questions. Error compiling. Oh, so folks, if you have questions about Global Hack Week at large, or how Global Hack Week works, or you have questions about submitting assignments, check out the Discord channel and check out the Global Hack Week Init FAQ channel. And then if you need help with submissions, go to Global Hack Week Init chat. The workshops you're going to see here on the channel throughout the day usually are specific workshops. For general questions, the Discord has everything you need. And then Google says, how does Google efficiently process so many requests? Is there any indexing done on the user's PC? Really great question, error compiling. So that's actually part of the rest things. So, and actually you could see it on that page a little bit. So if I go back to Google, and I go back to the inspector and we have a look at the network requests, and I say great cats, you will actually see in this column here, this transferred column is the data that's been transferred between me and Google. So you will see in this request that 15 kilobytes has been transferred, but a lot of what you'll see is cached. So this is stuff that Google has sent me before that is being cached in my browser in some way, so it doesn't need to send it to me again. And that's actually part of what makes a REST API. REST API is that cache, like there is caching involved in the architecture as a whole. So it makes it's part of the scalability mechanism. Okay, so and then Shallery said, did I code this myself? I didn't code this myself. This is just a thing provided by my solar panel provider. And I didn't actually know it had an API until I Googled around on the internet and found out it had an API and that I could get it. And that is the fun thing about APIs. You will find APIs in all kinds of places. You'll be able to find all kinds of data. A really great example of that is I live in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and Amsterdam actually has a whole load of APIs. So we actually have data.amsterdam.nl, and we have a whole load of data. Sorry, this is all in Dutch. A whole load of data provided by the city that anyone can use. And that's true of a lot of places. Another really great one that has a lot of open API, a lot of open data is Los Angeles. Los Angeles has a huge open data repository, and lots of people provide and expose their data. Jay said, "What did you use to call that, Jason? It was cool. The solar panel, Jason. This stuff. I just went to this URL. You won't be able to go to that URL. That's a local URL. It's on my network. But I mean, I could expose it to you in a fun way, but we'll look at that later. Okay, so how do we then start to use an API from our applications, right? So right now, everything I've shown you has been in the browser, and that's not super useful if we're programming, right? Or if we want to do something with this data. But luckily, there are lots of tools that help us work with this data. There are lots of tools that help us get this data and to use it in various places. And one of the most popular tools is a little thing called Curl. So Curl is a command line utility. It's open source. It's available on every operating system essentially. And sorry, my dog is standing very suspiciously in the hallway. Ernie, we're going to be joined by my dog. Everyone meet Ernie. Ernie is sad because his mum is out, so he's going to hang out with us. So Curl lets us lets us interact with HTTP URLs. Does Curl do the same thing as Postman? Yes, Postman is another example of a HTTP client. And what Curl and Postman and all these utilities help you do is create and send HTTP requests. So for example, that JSON I got earlier, I can get it again by doing it in Curl. Or not. What did I do wrong? There we go. Didn't HTTP. It's not HTTPS rather. So I can do a curl command and get the JSON from that endpoint, right? This is quite ugly, so I'm going to send it to JQ. JQ is a terminal command for processing JSON. So don't worry, it's okay to join late. We're talking about APIs, and in particular web APIs, and we've been joined by my little dog, who is very sad. So Ernie's going to be our companion today, and Ernie needs a bath. Ernie is quite stinky. I'm kind of demoing this little solar panel API, but let's move over to an API that you can all play along with as well. So one API that's really fun is the Poke API. This is a free and open API of all of the data from the Pokemon games. It's maintained by a bunch of people who love Pokemon, but it was originally actually built as a demo API to help people learn to use REST APIs. Now it's kind of outgrown that a little bit. Oh, Riro says everything becomes confusing when we start using the terminal. Please feel free to ask any questions about anything that's confusing as I use the terminal. I'm happy to stop and explain anything that's confusing. There's absolutely, I'm here to help you folks. If that means we spend more time doing something else than what I had planned, that is totally fine. So just to explain, I guess let me actually take a step back and explain what's happening on this terminal screen. So this little tilde and the green arrow is my prompt. So I run a really minimal terminal. This prompt, when you see this just means that the terminal is ready to accept commands from me. So I just have no information showing. Usually this would have your username or something. For me, I just have a tilde. So it just means it's ready to accept commands from me. And when I enter a command, you will see it does the thing, and you'll notice here there's no tilde and green arrow at the start of this line. So this means it's accepting input, and this is the output. It doesn't have that prompt at the beginning. And now that the command has finished, it's come back to giving me the tilde and the green arrow because my terminal is ready to accept input from me again. And then the command we're going to be using a lot today is curl. So curl is the name of the program. You can think of the command line just like your normal desktop, right? So when you've got your desktop, you've got all of your applications installed, and you normally get your applications along the bottom menu. So down here I've got Finder, I've got Firefox, I've got Messages, I've got my notes. The command line interface is just like that, except you get to those applications by typing the names of the applications instead. So here I go to curl. Curl is the program I'm going to be using, and the way I use it is by typing the program name, and then I tell it what I want it to do. So curl is the program name, and it will have some defaults set up. So by default, if I give curl a address, it will send a GET request to that address. So if I send it, for example, this endpoint from the Pokemon API. So this endpoint is to the Pokemon API, and we are going to the endpoint for Pokemon and then ditto. So this is a really important part of our REST API, and we'll come and have a look at this URL in a minute. But what I'm doing here is telling curl to go to this address and fetch me the contents of that address. So I'm going to get it to do it. And you'll see it's a huge mess of text, not very readable. But this is JSON. Just like the JSON we looked at in the browser for my solar panel, this is the data from that API. Now I can make this a little bit more readable by feeding it to another command. And if you see me do, sorry, let me clear again. If you see me do this, where I've got this vertical line, that's called a pipe, JQ, and then this thing. What I'm doing here is just sending this, so I'm setting up this command. I'm telling curl, go to this URL and get me the data, and then send that data through this pipe to this other command called JQ. And the reason I'm doing that is just because JQ will then make it nice and pretty and readable. So this is now this is tidied it up. This is now easy for us to read. So if I go to the top of this data, there's an awful lot of data. If I go to the top, so here's where I type the command, and then you can see it's gone to that API and gotten me the data about Ditto the Pokemon. So I can see all of the Pokemon's abilities. I can then get some information about those abilities. I can see the games that Ditto is in. My dog is really angry, y'all. He's very unhappy that I'm keeping him hostage here. And we can get all of that information. So let me answer some questions. Why are you mad? Ernie has questions. Let's start with anything for Windows. So Abhishek, everything I'm showing you is on my computer, which is a Mac, but everything I'm doing today works on on Windows and Linux just fine as well. Curl is available on every operating system. I have to put my dog down. He's really angry. Ooh. He's okay. So curl is available on every operating system. You can go here to get it. If you go to the where's the book? Let me link you to the actual part of the book that deals with installation. There we go. This has the installation instructions for every operating system, including Windows. When you are on Windows, I highly recommend that you use something called PowerShell instead of CMD. So on Windows, by default, you have two terminals available to you. You have CMD, which is kind of the old school, the original Windows terminal, and you have PowerShell. PowerShell is far newer, and really importantly, what makes it really useful for Windows users is that PowerShell, Windows is different to Linux and Mac OS. It has different, the command line interface works differently, but PowerShell has lots of aliases that make it look like it's working the same way as a Linux shell. So when you're copying commands from the internet, they are more likely to work in PowerShell than they are in CMD. You can go even further and do something called Windows Subsystem for Linux, which will actually install a Linux virtual machine on your Windows PC and then allow you to use a Linux Ubuntu command line from your Windows PC, and this then means that you can follow all of the instructions without worrying about being on Windows. This is if you're doing software development on Windows, this is really worth doing. This honestly, this takes using a Windows PC for development from like a 5 to an 11. It's really fantastic. But yeah, otherwise PowerShell is the way to go, and curl works just fine on PowerShell. Another question was, is this YAML? No, this is JSON. YAML and JSON do look very similar though, and they are both, YAML's a little bit different in that YAML is primarily a configuration language, but the reason it looks similar to JSON is that it also uses this notion of key value pairs. So everything on the left of a colon is a key, and then its value is specified on the right, and YAML does the same thing. My good friend and fellow developer at Twilio, Hugh Rawlinson, will tell you that YAML is a subset of JSON. They're both essentially the same language. Do you need to download JQ? Yes, you do need to download JQ if you want to use that as well. JQ is a really useful tool to have if you are going to be doing anything with JSON in the command line. Here is how to get that. You don't have to use it though. As I said, I'm only using it to make my JSON output look nicer. It's not compulsory to use. Okay, that was a lot of asides. How is everyone feeling? Do we give me a Y in chat if you're feeling good? Give me a no if you're totally confused and I've confused you. Okay, let's go back to our Pokemon API. So, lots of Ys. Excellent. Alrighty. Brief recap. So we've spoken about what an API is. We've then clarified what a web API is. Now, what's a REST API? So a REST API is an API that follows these RESTful principles. And the biggest way they affect us as consumers of an API is in the way those APIs are structured and the way that they use the HTTP verbs. So we've already spoken about get, but there are other methods. Let me zoom into this. So here on my page are a number of HTTP methods. So when we make a HTTP request, we can choose which. Ernie's mad, everyone. Give me a sec. I need to bribe Ernie to stop barking. Come here. When you go to a website in your browser, what you're doing is a GET request. You're just saying, hey, I want the data from this browser. I want the data from the server. Give me that data. If you are sending data to a server, that's a POST request. So when does your browser send a POST request? Your browser will send a POST request on things like form submissions. So for example, if I go back to Google and I were to say great cats, I've completed a form and I hit Google search, and at that point, the Google website is probably sending a POST request with my data to the Google server. This also happens, anywhere where you submit a form, when you make a Facebook post, when you make a tweet, when you submit your username and password, you are giving the website some data and telling it to send it to the server, and so that will be made with a POST request. We then also have, I've lost my tab. Okay. We then also have put and delete, and these are, you're less likely to use these as an API consumer, but just to let you know, put is like post, except it's for updating data instead of creating new data. And delete is pretty self-explanatory. It's for deleting something from the server. So when we look at an endpoint like our Pokemon API, this endpoint, what this one exposes, actually, if I go to the about documentation, in the documentation here, that's not what I want, API v2. Resource, okay. So if I come to the documentation for the Pokemon API, that's a great question, Arnold. I'll come back to that in a second. If I go to the documentation for the Pokemon API, you will see that this endpoint that it has here, it says it's a get endpoint. So that means that this URL only accepts get requests. I've realized I've just said a word you probably haven't heard before, and that is endpoint. An endpoint is basically just the full path of a URL. So, for example, if we're talking about this solar panel data again, when I go to envoy.local, envoy.local is the domain. If I now go to API v1 production, this is the endpoint. That's the end of the URL. It's where the data lives. So if someone talks about a API endpoint, they mean a complete URL that will actually, that is part of the API that will return or use data. Let's take a brief detour and talk about Arnold's question. Is there any relation between curl and npm? No. So what npm is a package registry. So npm is a package registry for the JavaScript ecosystem. So you go to npm when you want to get JavaScript libraries. So if I'm building a Node.js application and say I want to use Twilio in my Node.js application, I can come to npm to find the Twilio library, and then this will give me everything I need to download that library and use it in my code. Curl is a particular program. It's a particular command that we can install in our command line, which helps us reach APIs. So they're not related other than the fact that they're both things on the internet. Is the recording going to be posted somewhere? I believe so. It will be in the channel. I believe it will probably make it, I think usually MLH posts stuff to the YouTube. I'll let an MLHer confirm whether that will be the case. Okay, so that's the HTTP endpoint. So if we're getting data, we're going to be sending a GET request. If we're posting data, we're going to be sending a POST request. Then let's talk about the resources themselves. So the other big thing about REST is kind of the structuring of your URL. So the URL itself should kind of describe the activities. So if I go back to the home page and we have a look at this this Ditto API. So this URL here, sorry, I've messed up. So let's do that. So this API here, so it's API v2, so that's the domain, and then we've got Pokemon Ditto. This is actually two endpoints. So Pokemon on its own is an endpoint that returns every Pokemon. But then I can go further and say, okay, I want specifically Ditto. And this kind of structuring and layering of APIs is really important to how web APIs work. If I actually tidy this up again and go to JQ, you will see. So what I've just done is I've sent a request to just the Pokemon endpoint, so it's just Pokemon, and it has returned to me a bunch of Pokemon. But it hasn't returned any data about those Pokemon because I haven't asked for any data specifically. I've just asked for a listing of all the Pokemon. But what it's returned to me each time is a URL for where I can get information about that Pokemon specifically. And this is a really, this is called, you'll see this referred to as HateOS. I can never remember what it stands for. But basically the idea here is that an API should be programmatically navigable. So if I'm using this service from a program, I can say, hey, give me all the Pokemon. It then returns me a list of all the Pokemon, and then I can use one of these URLs to make the next request, right? So I know that Bulbasaur is at 1, so I can now make the next request to 1 to get the information about Bulbasaur specifically. And this is just like when you use a website on your computer, right? Like if I were to, go to Google, I can click through these pages to see my images of great cats. And this is a user interface in the same way that this endpoint for the Pokemon is kind of a user interface, right? Like it's telling me where to go next, and I can navigate it using purely the API. The other interesting thing about this that you'll have to be aware of when you use APIs is if any of you play Pokemon, you will know that there is more Pokemon than just 20, right? Raticate is not the last Pokemon. This is because there is just there is a simple one. Someone asked earlier a question about scalability, right? Like, there is a simple fact of life that you can't send infinite data over the internet. And so you don't always want to be sending loads of data. You want your requests to be fast. So I want to get fast requests. You want to send fast requests. I might not need all the data. If I'm just asking for the Pokemon, I might not need all however many Pokemon there are. I might just need a certain amount. So APIs do something called pagination. So they break up the data into pages, and then you, with your API client, have to go through the pages. So with the Pokemon API, pagination works a little bit differently in other APIs, but the Pokemon API does something really simple, which is it uses what's called a query parameter. So query parameters are basically, extra commands, extra data we can put in the URL. And so when you see a question mark in a URL, that means a query parameter. So by default, this API, the Pokemon API, gives 20 items. If I then went to say question mark, so I don't know why that's putting that in there. If I were to do question mark, so we're doing a query parameter, and I would say limit equals, let's do 21 just to prove the point. And then I pipe that to JQ. You will now see that instead of ending on Raticate, I now also get Spiro because I've asked for 21 items instead of 20 items. And, I can go to an extreme and I can say, give me 400. My dog is really unhappy. And I can get 400 if I want to. Not all APIs will do this. This API will just let me ask for as many things as I want to ask for. But some APIs will enforce limits. And then you may be saying, okay, if it's going to give it us in pages, and you can have 20 things on a page at a time, how do you decide which page you start at? Well, this API uses what's called an offset. So with the offset, that tells us how many items in I'm going to start. So the first page gives us 20 items. So if I want to ask for the next 20, I can say offset 20. And then our API request starts at 20. So we get Spiro at 21, and then it goes through to 40. So I've asked for 20 items. I've got limit equals 20, so I've asked for 20 items, but I'm starting at 20. So effectively, I've asked for the second page. I'm really sorry. I will be right back. My dog is making noises. Okay, we are back. Oh, sorry, he's being a little menace today. Okay, he's now downstairs, so he should chill out a little bit. Okay, so a couple of things we've covered there that are really important. We've spoken about the different HTTP methods and how they influence how we send things. We have spoken about the structure of URLs. So you have a domain, and then you have your API, and then you have your endpoints. These are the actual parts of the URL that will expose data, and those can be structured. So in the case of the Pokemon API, Pokemon is the endpoint that contains all of our info about Pokemon. We know we go here if we want info about Pokemon. But then we can add an extra layer to get info about specific Pokemon. And that's meant to be intuitive. It's meant to be kind of intrinsically navigable. I know that Pokemon is where the Pokemon data lives. And if I go to Pokemon 1, that's where data about Pokemon 1 lives. And then APIs are paginated to make sure that we send and get only the data that we need so we can make efficient requests. And we can change that pagination by changing the amount of data we receive and where we start receiving that data. How's everyone feeling? Let's do a vibe check. Give me yeses as everyone if you're feeling good. Give me some Y's in chat. If you're feeling terrible, put a cry emoji. Oh, I'm out of breath from running up and downstairs. Dutch stairs, y'all. No joke. Okay. We've got some yeses. Excellent. All right. So, we've only looked at GET requests so far. Let's talk about POST. So, as I said, curl by default sends a GET request, but we actually specify the method that we want curl to send with a flag. So in the command line, so let's, for folks who aren't as familiar with the command line, let's do a basic thing. When you've got a command, you specify its behavior with a flag. So flag starts with hyphens, and then there'll usually be, a series of letters. So in curl, the X letter, capital uppercase X, is the method. So that's where we specify what method we want curl to use. So in this case, I can do get, and I can do envoy.local API v1 production, and that will send a GET request. I've done HTTPS again. Sorry, this endpoint isn't HTTPS. I can send a GET request to that endpoint to get the data. I could also put post here. So if I wanted to send data, I could put post. Great question, Draco. I'll come back to you in a sec. So if I put an X, I can do post. I can't just send this though, because that endpoint might actually be a post endpoint. It's concerning. I'm now worried. No, we're okay. When you send a post though, you need to send some data because, something needs to happen with the post. So let's find an endpoint that will let us use post and use it as an example. So first of all, Draco says limit 25 means we can see 25 items offset. So no. So to talk about the limits again, so limit 25, if I just do a limit 25, so if I do limit 25, I will get 25 items starting from the beginning of the API. So I'll get 25 starting from 1. If I want to get 25 starting from a particular place, then I do offset equals 25. Limit is how much you get. Offset is where it starts. They're two separate things, and you need to specify them both if you want to use both. Does that make sense? And then Joy asked, can I tell the difference between get and post? Yes, let's look at another API, because the Pokemon API doesn't have any post endpoints. So this Pokemon API is just for getting data about Pokemon. We can't change the data about the Pokemon from the API, I don't think. Anyway, let me double check. Yeah, no. There's nothing on here that we can post to. So I've got another API here, which has some post endpoints. So this API is a fake API just for people to test. So you can go crazy on this. You can't do anything wrong with it. And what this API does is just provides, it's like a fake blog, right? So this API has posts, it has comments, it has albums, photos. So let's, for example, use this. So if I do curl x get, and I believe it would just be posts 1. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm using this just like I did the Pokemon API. So I've got the domain, and then the endpoint is posts, and we're getting the first post. So I'm asking for the first post. Yes, exactly, Draco. Or sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your Twitch name. DK Ratto so basically on page 3, if I want to show items from 40 to 60, I need to use offset 40. Yes, that's exactly correct, because the API defaults to a length of 20. So if you don't specify a limit, it will give you 20 items. So then you're specifying the offset at 40. So then you'll get 41 through to 60. That is exactly right. Yeah, spot on. So, so this fake API lets us get posts, but this fake API also lets us create posts. So we can see here in these routes that we've got, and root is like another name for endpoint. So we can see here that we can also create posts. So let's look at the guide and see what we need to do for creating a post. Create us, cool, awesome. So this is in JavaScript, but that's fine. So we can create a post. We just need a title, a body, and a user ID. We've got a couple of things here. We've also got headers, but hopefully that will be fine. Give me 1 second. Okay. But we'll include them anyway, just in case. Right, so all we've seen so far with our curl usage is, sorry, what's the endpoint here? Posts. Okay, cool. So all we've seen here with our curl usage is getting stuff. We're now going to post something. And this is where another interesting thing about REST, kind of like REST structure comes in, which is you will often use the methods, the HTTP methods, as part of the interface, right? So if I get to posts, it does what you'd expect. It gets me the posts, but I can use the same endpoint to create posts. So this API uses the same endpoint. It uses /posts as the endpoint where we create posts. And that's intuitive, right? Like if I say I'm going to get posts, you expect to get posts, but if I'm going to create a post, you might think like, oh, well, you want to do that on like create posts, but the create here is redundant, right? Because we're posting, sorry, there's posts in the URL and there's poster methods. We're using the HTTP method post on the posts endpoint. And so it's intuitive that we're creating a post. We don't need to add any additional information to the URL, right? We can use the same URL and handle the get method differently from the post method. So I'm going to curl to this. And this is where we're going to see something a little bit different. So when we post, we need to include information, right? What we're doing here is we're sending information to this URL. And what we're sending in this case is the post that we want to create. And this guide here, let me put this to the side. So this is the documentation for creating a resource. And this is in JavaScript. Don't worry if you can't read this. I'm just going to have it on the screen so I can read it and I'll explain it. So there's when you post, you have what's called a post body. And the post body contains the information that you're sending to the website. And this is in JSON, just like the data we've been getting. So we get data in JSON, we're also going to send it in JSON. And that JSON has 3 fields. It has a post title, a post body, so the contents, and the user that's creating it. So I'm going to do the same thing. And in curl, the way you include a post body is with the D flag. And then we need to build our JSON object. So I'm just going to put the JSON object here. It's going to be ugly because I'm doing it in line. And that JSON object, we're just going to copy it straight from there. So it's going to be title. And then we're going to have the title. We'll call our post great GHW. And then we need a comma because we're moving on to the next item. And then we'll have body. And then we'll call that having a lovely time. So that's what I'm putting in the body of the post. And then the user ID, we'll use the same one here that they're using. We'll just use one. I don't know who that user is, but it doesn't matter. It's an example API. So that's the contents. That's the body of my post request. Another thing that we need to do is we need to specify the headers. So this is something I haven't explained yet, which is probably a bit naughty of me. But when we send a HTTP request, that HTTP request has different parts, just like the body of a website does. It has headers and it has a body and it has some other parts, but the two relevant parts are headers and a body. In the headers is where we put the information that the web server needs to know how to process that request. So it includes, for example, the type of content we're asking for. So they don't have an example from listing. So one of the common header fields is content type, and that's the type of content we're asking for. Or in this case, where we're doing a post, it's the type of content we're sending, because we're sending JSON. So earlier we were talking about, hey, if I go to google.com in my browser, what the server is sending me is HTML. But if I go to my solar panel endpoint in my browser, it's sending me JSON. How does the server know what to send me, what I'm asking for? Well, that comes down to the header. If I go to google.com in my browser, the HTTP request would include a header that says I'm asking for HTML, right? If I am making a request from curl, it's going to be asking for something different. So in the chat, we're asking, can you please explain that create post part once again? Yes, no problem. We'll go over this again. So let me zoom in on. Let me make this full size and zoom in on it. So no, that's messed up the formatting. So in curl, I'm using the X flag to specify what request I want to send, and I'm sending a post request. I'm sending the post request to this endpoint, the post endpoint. On this API, when you send a post request to the post endpoint, the API knows that you're trying to create a post. So by sending a post request to this endpoint, this website knows that I want to create a post. When you send a post, the whole purpose of a post is that we're sending this website data. So how do we tell curl that we want to send data? Well, that's what the -d is for. So -d is a flag that says to curl, we want to send some data. And so then curl knows that we're sending data. And so after the -d, we put the data that we're sending. And I'm sending a JSON payload. So I want to send JSON, which contains my post information. And so my JSON contains a title, the contents of the post, and the user ID it's created by. Does that make sense? Abhishek, Kratos, does that answer what you're after? Take a drink whilst the Twitch delay gets us. Please feel free to ask it. Yes, perfect. Wonderful. Okay, so now the next thing we need to do is the header, because we need to tell this server that it should expect to receive JSON from us, so it knows what to do. We need to make sure that it's expecting JSON. So in curl, the flag to tell curl that you want to set a header is just H for header, really simple. And that's going to be content type. Is that double? Yes, content type, and then it's application/JSON. So a couple of things about this. Headers are like a thing that there are standards around. So you are not expected to headers aren't expected to be guessable, right? Like if you want to know how to do a certain header, like you go to MDN and you look up HTTP headers. Like these are things that just exist, and you have to look them up when you need them. So content type is just one of the headers that exists out there, and if you need to use it, you'll go look up the stuff. And same with that, where I've got application JSON, with the content type header, there are certain content types that exist. You can create your own content types, but generally there's a certain set of content types that are used, and you will look them up. So again, application JSON. Oh, no, it's not actually even listed on here. I don't know where it would be listed on here. But yeah, basically, long story short, when I put in the header content type application JSON, that is not a thing you're expected to know. This is a thing that, has been specified, and there are certain ways of doing it, and you'll just learn them over time. Don't worry about it. Kratos says D is the data, and the server knows we are asking about JSON file by looking at the JSON format. Almost. So D is the data, and the server could know we're sending JSON by looking at what it's sent, but more commonly it's going to look at the content type header. So it doesn't need to look at the data and say, hey, that's JSON, because we can actually tell it it's JSON by sending this content type header that says application JSON. So that's what we're doing. So, all right, that was a lot. Let's just do a quick recap. So this endpoint, we've got this fake API. It's got an endpoint called posts. That posts endpoint can either give us all the posts on the server, or it will accept a post request to create a new post on the server. So we have got curl to send a post request using the X flag, which is how you set the HTTP method in curl. And then we are including our data with the D flag, which as Kratos says, D probably stands for data. I hadn't realized that until you said it. So we're giving curl the D flag, and then we're including our data in a JSON blob. And then we are setting a content type header. So our HTTP request will be a post request, and that post will have two things, a header and a body. The header will say, hey, server, watch out, we're sending you some JSON, and then the body will contain the JSON. So I'm going to hit go. And the server has returned to me a JSON blob, because this is one thing that wasn't intuitive to me to start. Post requests still expect a response. So when we send a GET request, we're asking for data. We are sending a request to the server, and we're saying, hey, give me some data, and we get that data back in the response. With a post request, you still expect a response, because you want the server to acknowledge that it's done the action, right? Like if I said to the server, hey, I'm sending you a post, can you please create a post for me? If the server didn't respond, how would we know that post has been done? And so servers are expected to respond to a post request as well, and they will do that via a HTTP status code, which we haven't actually looked at yet. I wonder if there's a way for me to get curl to print the status code. Let me have a look. Apparently just I. Oh. Wait. Sorry, I'm trying to see this way for me to print the status code. So apparently if I do W, learning together, boop. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Don't ask me what that does. I don't know. But importantly, so what I've just done with this is I've asked curl to print the status code. So you'll see here, we get the response from the server, we get some JSON, but we also get 201. What does that mean? Well, so whenever you make a HTTP request, you will get a status code. And you've seen these, like you have probably gone to a website and seen a 404, right? 404 not found. 404 not found is a HTTP status code. It means, hey, you've asked for some data and we don't have it. We haven't found the data. But there are lots of status codes from between 100 up to 600, well, up to 599. And the status codes all mean different things. So everything in the range 200 to 299 is different types of success. So if when we send a GET request to a website, if it's able to give us that data and it does it successfully, we just get a 200 OK. With this endpoint, we have actually gotten a 201, which means created. So it's telling us not only has our request succeeded, but our post request specifically has actually created the post that we wanted it to create. So I'm running this post command to create a post, and the server is sending back the post that's been created. So it's sending us a JSON object that represents the resource that we've created, but it's also sending us the HTTP status code 201. So I know exactly that the request has been successful and that the resource I wanted to create has been created. And there are all kinds of status codes. You will occasionally run into a status code that you've never seen before. Redirect is another really common one. So the resource does exist, but not on this URL or not on this resource anymore. I believe that's in the 300 range. Yes, it's in the 300 range. So 301 moved permanently is another one that you get quite a lot. And you will, some websites will display these to you. Others, it will just be it'd be kind of implicit information that your browser uses or that curl uses. But checking the status code after you send a request is really important to make sure that, if you're building a program that's using an API, you will want to check that the request has been successful, right? Like imagine if we were creating Google, right? And a user came here and searched for great cats. So Google, the website, is going to send a request to Google, the server, with my information. That request needs to succeed for Google, the website, to show us the information, right? And so the information sending back a response is really important. Okay, let's take a break there because we've introduced a bunch of stuff. We have sent our post request with the header and we've gotten a body return, and we've introduced HTTP status codes. How are people feeling about that? Do we have any questions about HTTP status codes? Wait, what? Do we feel good about the status codes? Do we feel good about how that post request worked? Everyone is good. Okay. Kratos, how are you feeling? Abhishek, how are you feeling? You still here? Perfect. Thank you, Akura. All right. So, this has been a bit of a crash course into what APIs are and what REST APIs are and how we might use them with something like curl. Let's talk about the Twilio Weekly Challenge. So the Twilio Weekly Challenge, what we've set this up to do, sorry, the challenges in for the week with Twilio, what we've set these up to do is to basically teach this stuff that we've done in this workshop and then to help you do it with Twilio. So after day one is getting your Twilio account set up, but then you'll install curl, you'll do all that. But then what you will do throughout the rest of the week is you will use an API. You will use an API in different ways. So in day 3, you're actually going to use the Twilio API with curl, sending a post request just as we've done today to make a phone call through the Twilio API. So the Twilio daily quests are set up to help you practice what we've covered today and to teach it. So day 3, you'll use curl just as we've done today, and we'll explain how curl works. And then in day 4, we're going to go a little bit further, and we're going to use a Node.js, so a JavaScript application, or a Python application to send the request to the API and to receive requests from an API. We're going to build our own API rather than curl. So let's talk about that a minute, because we've only looked at curl, and curl is a super great tool. It's a super great tool for, playing with APIs and experimenting with APIs. But if we're trying to build our own web application, we're trying to build a mobile app, curl's not going to be super useful for us. We need to make, a program that receives those requests. So let's make a new folder. So how do I want to do this? Let's return to our board for a minute. So I want to take a step back and go to a higher level and talk about us building our own web applications. So we are going to build, later on in the week, we're going to build our own JavaScript or our own Python web application on our machines to use the Twilio API. And more importantly, we're going to build kind of our own API. We're going to build an application that's going to catch what's called webhooks. Webhooks are HTTP requests sent to our service in response to an event. So when an event happens, we get a webhook. One of the things you're going to see referenced, and you'll see this in your development journey quite a lot, is a tool called Ngrok. And I want to talk briefly about why you will see the tool called Ngrok, because this is really important to understanding kind of how the internet works, and why you're being asked to use it. So when I go to my browser and I type google.com, I can get to this website, right? Like my request to google.com goes through the internet, it goes through the tubes, and eventually ends up at Google's server, right? It gets routed successfully to Google's server. So I want you to all try something. I want you to try going to that. So go to envoy.local/API/v1/production. You won't be able to, because this endpoint, first of all, it's local, it's only on my network, but it's not exposed to the internet. You can't get to that endpoint. It is only on my network. It is not, there is no pipe from my house to the rest of the internet, right? And that is the same as when you create an application on your local machine. So if you were to create a little, one second. So let's open this. Let's get some VS Code going. If we were to create a little web application right now, we're just going rogue at this point, chat. npm install save express. I'll explain what I'm doing in a sec. Okay. So if we were to create a little web application right now, we'll create a little Express app. I can never remember how to actually write an Express app from scratch, so I'm probably using very old Express. We'll be on port 3000, and then we'll create one endpoint. We'll have it be the root endpoint. And then we're going to get a request in the response body. Sorry, this makes no sense. I will explain this in a minute. Let me just hammer this out and then, okay, and that's the endpoint. And now I need to do the listening, app.listen, needs to be port, and then we need to create the function, console. Ooh. Okay. Let me make sure this works. Hello, perfect. Okay, so, right. Rewind. So you can't get to my solar panels because they're not exposed on the internet. The same thing happens. So I've just made a little web app in JavaScript. If you haven't seen JavaScript before, or you haven't seen this before, basically don't worry about it. It's just a demo. You don't need to know this. This isn't important. But what I've done is I've created an app with something called Express. Express is a web framework for Node.js. So it lets you make what's called routing web applications really easy. So this is very useful for creating APIs. And then I have defined a get endpoint. We know about those. We've learned them in the rest of the session, right? Like it's an endpoint on an API that responds with data. So I've said, hey, I want my application to accept get requests at this endpoint. And when I do just slash, that's called the root endpoint. So just just my basic API, like nothing else. You know, I could put hello world there, and then it would be domain/hello world. But if I just do slash, it's just to the web application. And then I want it to respond by sending the data hello world. So when I go to the web address, localhost 3000, and then because I've done it on slash, it's just the website, I get sent hello world, right? So that is great. I've made a little web application. I can go to it in my browser and it sends me data, but it's not exposed to the internet. You can't go to, localhost 3000 isn't a real web address, right? Like you can't go to that and see this application. And that's where Ngrok comes in. So if you wanted to make your web applications visible to the rest of the internet, you would normally have to deploy them somewhere, or you'd have to do a lot of really complicated router configuration to, expose the right ports so that people could get to your laptop. Sorry, one sec. But that's a lot of work. It's a lot of extra stuff to learn. Ngrok makes it really easy. So Ngrok is a command that you're going to download, and you'll learn about this in day 4. And what Ngrok does is let us do one command that then generates a URL for us. So if I go Ngrok HTTP 3000, it is very possible that I haven't installed. I restored my computer recently and I didn't install Ngrok. Okay, well, we're going to install Ngrok together. Oh, cool. There's a brew command now. That's really helpful. We'll do that. So what I can do with Ngrok is I can just run one command, and what Ngrok will do is it will generate a URL for us, and then it will link that URL to the web, to the port on our computer. And as long as we're running Ngrok in our terminal, we will be able to get to our local host URL, our little web server, from from Ngrok. So this is now Ngrok running. And as long as this is running, this forwarding URL will get to my localhost server. So if I now go to here, I get an error. Apparently, I need to set up. This is new. You need to sign up now. Okay. If I authorize my Ngrok, I will get it. So I'm going to do that on a different screen. Because I actually have an account. I just need to set up my Ngrok. Because I restored my machine and didn't set up Ngrok when I did it. Where's my 1Password going to come up? Over there. Perfect. Just bear with me. Bear with me 1 second. Whilst I set up Ngrok. Oops. So Ngrok's what's called a tunneler, or like an well, that's not correct. Ngrok creates a tunnel. It creates a tunnel from their server to our domain. And then I need to connect my account. And I'm going to do that over in a different terminal because this exposes some sensitive information. So we'll do it over here. Okay, there we go. So I've now authorized, so this should work. It does not work. Then restart the Ngrok agent. There we go. This should now work. It does now work. Okay, perfect. So sorry, I had to log in. Okay, let's try again. So now when I go to here, boom, we get hello world. And if I give you this URL, you can get to my application. Okay, so just to recap that, when I make a web application on my PC, using Python, using Java, using JavaScript, whatever it is not accessible from the internet because it's going to be on localhost. It hasn't got a domain attached, and we don't, your local home Wi-Fi or university Wi-Fi isn't going to, your university internet isn't going to have the ports set up to expose a web server on your local machine to the internet. And you can do those things. If you're into, like multiplayer games and you've ever done port forwarding, what you are doing is exposing your ports to the internet so that people can connect to your computer. You can do the same thing for a local web server. Or you can deploy, if you've heard of things like Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud Platform or Heroku or Microsoft Azure, all these things, those are places where they have servers already exposed to the internet and you can put your application on there and it's good to go. But when we're just testing, when we're playing around, Ngrok is a really useful way to get a URL for our application and expose it on the internet. And I can see that some of you have tried going to this because I'm getting 200 OKs. And so if I've made a quick application, I want to share it with my teammates or I want to share it with a friend, Ngrok is a really easy way to do that. You wouldn't use Ngrok to, host your personal website because this is not made for that, right? It's not a production web server. You are forwarding all of your traffic through another server. It's not a great way to do it. But for testing, it's super good. So Kratos has said, port 3000 is your side, one kind of your address, but we don't know your address or where to find that hello world. To make the hello visible to us, all Ngrok helps. Yes, exactly, Kratos. That is spot on. That is exactly right. LBN is asking, is it possible to install Visual Studio 2022 on Ubuntu, not VS Code? I don't know anything about Visual Studio. I'm really sorry, LBN. I use VS Code. I don't use the full version of Visual Studio because I'm a JavaScript developer. And so VS Code does everything I need it to do. I would recommend asking in the Discord. Someone there might use VS Code. But I'm afraid I don't know anything about Visual Studio. Sorry, someone in Discord might use the full Visual Studio, but I only use VS Code. I'm very sorry. I imagine it should be possible, though. And Visual Studio is for .NET stuff, right? So it's probably possible through whatever the Linux.NET runtime is. Okay. Alrighty. So let's go back to this web application. So earlier with Curl, we were sending requests to servers and getting responses, or we were posting infos to those servers and getting responses. What we've done here is the other way round. We have built a server and we have defined the API, right? we have created the endpoint and we are giving the data. So, you know, I can use curl on this now. Let me close down my Ngrok. So I can use curl on this now by going curl http localhost 3000 and I get hello world because that's what I've returned, right? You know, I could change this. I could have it return JSON. I could have it return HTML. Right now I'm just returning text, but I've created my own API. That doesn't mean that we can't still then send requests from this, right? We can still. That's actually a good question. We can still use APIs from our server, and you know, there's a lot of good reasons to do that. So earlier, I was talking about Axios, which is one of the libraries to send HTTP requests. So I could install that and use that right here. So I could do npm install save Axios, and I could do const Axios equals require Axios. I imagine it's just Axios. And then when we get a request, I could be really cheeky and I could do something like, say, axios.get, and then I could put in, what was the, like pokeapi.co, hang on. Oh no, where did I put it? There it is. Let's just go back to pokeapi. API v2 Pokemon. API v2 Pokemon 1. And then oh, sorry, I've ended that line. This is just going to take a res, and then I want to res.send res dot. Do I need to do dot body here? Let's try it. Just send the whole res. Okay, so this is very silly. You wouldn't do this, but so what I'm doing here now, and I don't even know if this will work. I've gone completely off the deep end now. Now, chat. I'm just making it up as we go along. Empty reply from server. That's not good. Oh, it's because we're waiting on this. That is a good point. This is going to have to be async. So async, and then we will. Sorry, we're now going into async land. This is a terrible example. I've done horrible things to myself. So we'll call it response equals await axios.get. I will, as soon as I work out what I've done, I will explain it. And then res.send response. There we go. Yes, and also I shadowed. Oh, we're getting errors now. Oh, because we've got a circular structure. Let's just do a console log of response. This has gone so far out of like the way it needed to for me to demo the fact of making a HTTP request, but I'm committed now, so we're going to make this stupidity work. There we go. Okay, perfect. Perfect. And then we'll throw a JSON.stringify on this. Okay. Restart. Oops. Why is that failing? Circular structure. Okay, we won't JSON.stringify that. Okay. Alrighty. Let me read chat. Abhishek asked, will these codes be pushed to GitHub or you'll share a link? Abhishek, what this sample code here is really, really basic. There's actually already a sample application in the Twilio Quest, in the Twilio daily challenge tutorial that has very similar code. So when you get to day 4, when you get to the daily challenge where you're doing what I'm doing now, you'll actually find there's a link to a tutorial that will cover basically the same thing that I've done today. So if you follow the daily if you do the Twilio daily challenges, you'll have a tutorial that will cover everything that I'm doing step by step across the whole week. So you should be good to go. Okay, so I've done something very silly, and I'll show you what that is. So basically what I've now done, so we have a web server here that is exposing an endpoint that we can go to with our browser to get hello world. But then when we go to that endpoint, what we're actually doing is using Axios, which is a HTTP client. You can think of it just like curl. So we're using Axios to go to the Pokemon API and to get the Pokemon API data for Bulbasaur and then to put it in our console.log. So I've now made an API, I guess, that goes to another API and gets the data. Actually, where's the body? Let's change that to body. There we go. Undefined. Why are you undefined? I need to put in a URL parser. I need to do the thing I always forget to do, which is... I don't think I need to do this anymore. I don't write enough Express. And then I need to do... got app there. App.use body parser.url coded extended true. And then it should just be response, but this is from Axios. That's not actually the problem. One second. Axios response body. Why don't I know how to get the response body from Axios? Oh, it's data. That'd be why. It's not body at all, it's data. Every API is a little bit different. Oh, well, I've messed it up. What's this set about? Body pass. Okay. Cool. There we go. Okay. So now I should be able to JSON stringify that. I didn't want... Let's give that another refresh. Perfect. Okay, now I've actually got JSON. Okay. So you don't have to use Axios to do this. There's a better way to do it natively in Node.js now, but I lose the ability to remember any JavaScript from the last 5 years from live stream apparently, so that's how we're doing it. So in our web application, we are now actually making use of another API, and we go get that API, we get the whole response, and when you request an API, remember that it's not just the data. We also get the headers that we spoke about. We get lots of other stuff with that response. So what we're doing here is we are just getting the data. We're then converting it into a string because this comes in as JSON. So we're converting it into a string so that we can output it in our console, and then we're sending back a response to the browser that requested it. So I now get the results from this Pokemon API in my application, and I can now use those to do what I want. So for example, I could set, we could say const response data equals response dot data, and then I could output Bulbasaur has a, let's look at a piece of data, has a, what have we got in Bulbasaur? Let's actually go look at it on the Pokemon API. So we can say Bulbasaur, where's Bulbasaur's health? I want Bulbasaur's health stats. 3. Oh, that's just silly. Has a HP of stats 0. Bulbasaur has a base HP of, and then I can say response data dot stats 0 dot h stats 0, and then what's the key? Stats 0 base stat dot base stat, and hopefully if I now go to the URL, I error because I've done something wrong. Why are you bad? Oh, that's because I'm just a silly boy. Yes, that should work. Boom. Bulbasaur has a base HP of 45. Okay, there we go. That was far too difficult to get to where I wanted. But, okay, so to run over that again. So we have a Node.js application that's going to the Pokemon API. It's getting the data for Bulbasaur. We're getting out. It's doing a get request to the Bulbasaur API. It's getting all of that data. We're getting just the just the get body, just the information that the API sent back, and then we are sending that in response to the request to our server. So someone has come to our server and sent a GET request. So we are now responding to that request with Bulbasaur has a base HP of, and we are using the data from the API we just pulled. And so this is a good example well, it's a terrible example, but this is an example in microcosm of how and why you might use an API, right? I've built a little web service that is going and getting data from another API out on the internet in order to use that data here in the API. In order to use that data in my web application. And so when you walk through the daily challenges, you'll be doing a similar kind of thing, except you will be using the Twilio API. So in day 5, for example, which I still need to write the instructions for, you will be receiving a request from Twilio with the contents of an SMS that has been sent to your Twilio number. So you'll be getting the information from Twilio, and then you can handle that information in a similar way to what we've done, and then you'll be responding to that SMS message to send an SMS message back. But then you could go further and make calls or send text from the application, and all those steps will be in the MLH Getting Started guide, in the URL here. Okay, that is pretty much all the content that I wanted to cover today. Let's do some summaries. Let's summarize stuff. So we started off talking about what APIs are. APIs are an application programming interface. There are lots of different types of APIs. Here we are talking about web APIs, but in particular we're talking about REST APIs. And REST APIs are a type of API, and the REST stands for the types of behavior that you expect from that API, the certain structure we expect and how we interact with it. And that structure is one that is going to use the structure of the URL itself to provide the interface. So we expect that there will be endpoints, and the behavior of those endpoints will vary on the HTTP method that we use. So Pokemon get will get us all the Pokemon. Pokemon post would create a Pokemon. That endpoint doesn't exist, but you get the idea. We expect that there'll be pagination. So in the Pokemon API, we have a limit to how many things we receive, and we have an offset to page through it. And there are lots of other guarantees that don't matter to you that much when you're getting started, but a really important one actually is something called idempotence, which we actually saw happen in the JSON placeholder API, because at one point we made a curl request that created the same post twice, and that was fine because the post endpoint is idempotent. So idempotent means that if you do the same thing twice, you should create the resource in the same way. So that's another part of REST. So REST APIs, as we discussed, are commonly used on the internet to for services either to interact with their front end. So you would have a front end of your application that the way it's getting data to update the application, just like in the Google and the Google search box and the Google server example, is via an API between the front end and the back end. Or as a programmer, as a consumer, we can use these APIs to get data ourselves. And the first way we looked at doing that was through Curl. So Curl lets us send requests, and we learned a lot of things about Curl. So we learned that we can just, by default, Curl will let us just send a GET request. Oh, I've done HTTPS again, sorry. We've learned that by default, Curl lets us just send a HTTP request. But then we can specify a method with X. We can then specify data to send, if I can type. We can then specify data to send with post, and using the D flag. This isn't a post endpoint, so I couldn't do this, but we can then send JSON with the D flag for data, we assume. That's not going to work because I've got double speech marks. And we can send headers with the H flag. And we spoke about headers. Headers are kind of just a thing you have to learn. There's no shortcut to headers. But headers let us communicate to the server what kind of things are going to happen when we send this request. So we've learned about curl, we've learned about using someone else's API, and then we spoke about how, basically how the internet works, how when you create a web server on your local machine, it's not by default exposed to the internet. So we talked about how Ngrok helps us test our applications by creating a URL for us that's connected to our server. And really important thing I want to emphasize here, when you use Ngrok for this, you have to leave Ngrok open. So it has to stay open on this window. So if you're using a terminal for something else, you'll want to open another terminal and leave Ngrok off on the side somewhere whilst you use your other terminal. And the way we were using Ngrok was to a little Node.js web server that we made. And I've done this in Node.js because I'm comfortable with Node.js, so apparently not that comfortable. But if you this will work with anything. If you're a Python developer, the equivalent of what I've done is something called Python Flask. So Flask is to Python what Express is to Node. So you can use Python Flask. It's really easy to make little APIs with Python Flask. And there are examples. There's a tutorial for both Node and Python in the GitHub Daily Challenge repo. And then in here, we brought it all together. So we made our own endpoint. We made a get endpoint that returned hello world. But then we combined that with making a HTTP request. So just as we did with curl, but from inside our Node.js program to another server. And then we used that data in the response we sent to the request to us. So we've made an application that does in itself provide an API, but it's then going and getting data from another API to do its job. And then we're exposing that over Ngrok. So Joy says, it's common to struggle with API. This seriously gives us confidence. I'm always happy to fail in public. For someone who live streams like 4 times a week, if you put me in front of the keyboard and tell me to live stream some code, I will forget how to write everything. So I'm always happy to do things wrong. If you ever want someone to stream coding badly, always happy to do that for you. Kratos has said, so we are getting the data from that URL. We are storing the data in response data, and we need the base HP. Yes, yeah, that's a really good point. So if you're not familiar with this syntax here, this is a JavaScript thing, but most languages have something similar. This is called variable interpolation. So basically, I've made a variable here called response data, and response data contains some data that I want, and I'm building a string. And then this $sign and squiggly brackets basically will have JavaScript evaluate this expression. So JavaScript will run this code here and then insert the result into the string. So rather than printing Bulbasaur has a base HP of this, it will actually go and get the data at this variable and put it into the string. So your programming language probably has a version of this. This is a lot easier than like, the old school way of doing it would be something like, building your string. So I would say like Bulbasaur has a base HP of, and then I do a plus, and I do like response data here. And this is fine. This works totally well. You can absolutely do this. But this lets you do it kind of like in, without messing around with closing your with closing your speech marks and that kind of thing. And it's just a lot nicer. And the other cool thing about this actually is this type of string in JavaScript deals with new lines. So you can have new lines in the text and it's totally fine. Zainab says, so we can't build the application using Django. You can build the application using whatever you want. So Django is, if you're not familiar with Django and you're listening, Django is a Python web framework. It's a lot bigger than Flask. It's a lot more full featured. For the purposes of the Twilio Daily Challenge, we don't care what web framework you use. We suggest using Node or Python because if you're new to building web applications, it's very easy to get started. So we suggest using Express or Flask because if you're new to web applications, it's very easy to get started. But the actual things you're going to submit is the results of using the API in your application. So if you use Django, that's totally fine. It won't affect your submission on DevPost at the end of the daily challenge. It just affects how you get started. So feel free to use Django. Feel free to use a language other than Node.js or Python. If you're confident in Java or PHP, or if you're somehow writing web applications in C, whatever you want, like we suggest Node.js and Python here because it's a good place to get started if you don't do it. So if you're completely new to this, I recommend you follow the tutorial. If you read over this and you're like, oh, I know this is no problem, do whatever you're comfortable with. You just have to have the right data to show at the end of the daily step. Does that make sense, Zainab? Perfect. Alrighty. So that's everything for me, and I finished a little bit early. So I don't want to leave the MLH channel hanging for 10 minutes. So does anyone have any questions? Anyone want to go on any detours? Any questions that people have about Twilio or what I've shown today or anything we've spoken about? I am happy to answer any questions for the remaining time that I have available. One thing I will mention as well, so the weekly challenge is to play Twilio Quest. Twilio Quest will actually cover a lot of what we've covered here today. So if you don't know Twilio Quest, let me spin it up. So Twilio Quest is a Kratos says, so this Twilio session is a challenge. So the stuff in here is a daily challenge. So if you go to the challenges, every day in the challenges will map to a day in here. So if this is your first Global Hack Week, every day on the website there will be a new selection of challenges, and those challenges earn your guild points. I think that's how it works. I'm really sorry to MLH if I'm lying, but every day you can complete these challenges to learn stuff, to earn points, and every day there'll be one step of that Twilio guide that we've been following, that Twilio tutorial that I've been talking about, this one here that I've just linked, will be one of the daily challenges. So every day you can come through, learn something about REST APIs, learn something about Twilio, learn something about web frameworks, and it will be worth points in the daily challenges. So every day, come to this page, do a Control F, look for the Twilio, because right now it's Get Ready to Hack with Twilio, and it links to day one in the README. Does that make sense, Kratos? Zanab, if you've already started parts of Twilio Quest, that is totally fine, because all you need to do to complete the Twilio Quest challenge, is to complete one mission. So if you've already played some Twilio Quest in the past, You just have to play a different mission. And we've got a new mission now that you probably haven't seen called the Untitled Forge. This is new since we last came. So there will at least be something that you haven't done. So you just need to submit the Twilio Quest challenge. I closed the tab again. Let's go back. So to submit the Twilio Quest challenge, all you need to do is there's actually no submission link on this. We'll have to get a submission link added. Yeah, you just need to complete a single mission. Kratos, can you submit day 2 challenges on day 3? That's a very good question. I actually don't know the answer to. If any MLH folks are listening and know the answer to that question, please feel free to answer it. Otherwise, Kratos, if we don't get an answer here, I would ask that in the MLH Discord. It might also be in the FAQ. Let's have a look. No, it's not. But what I will say, Kratos, is all of the challenges build on top of one another. So if you can't submit the day 2 challenge on day 3, by the time you get to day 3, like, you can still just continue and submit the other days. Zeus asks for Twilio Swag. If you want to get some Twilio Swag, the easiest way to do it during Global Hack Week is to participate in the Twilio Quest operation. If you check out the weekly challenge in the README, and you look at the winning a Twilio Quest prize pack. So if you play Twilio Quest during Global Hack Week and you join the leaderboard, and instructions to join the leaderboard are in here. They're also in the challenge page. At the end of the week, the top 5 players will win a Twilio Quest swag pack. So if you... in fact, Mary answered. If you need an extension, so Kratos, if you can't submit on day 3 because you've got your exam, you can let Mary know, or the other MLHs, and they will give an extension on that challenge. And Kratos said, so if you miss day 3, you can submit the day 3 part. Sorry, if you miss day 2, you can submit day 3. Yes, Kratos. If you miss any one part of this challenge, just continue and you can keep submitting it. Like, you don't have to submit all of it. You can submit any part of it. They do build on one another. So, like, you will struggle to do day 6 if you haven't done day 4. But as long as if you do day 4, but you just miss the deadline to submit it, so say you do day 4 and day 5 on the same day, then you're totally fine. You can submit day 5. That's totally fine. Whew. Talking for 2 hours is thirsty work. So yeah, Twilio Swag, play Twilio Quest. If you haven't seen it, you can grab it at twilio.com/quest. It is available on all good operating systems on Mac, Windows, Linux, and Raspberry Pi. This is actually a Raspberry Pi running it right behind me in this little cabinet. So you can play it on whatever you want. And when you play it, if it's your first time, it will take you through a tutorial on how to play. But then you will eventually end up in what's called the Fog Owl. The Fog Owl is kind of... That's very loud. This is the Fog Owl. This is, where the game takes place. And there are 2 places on the ship where there are missions. So you've got this blue swirling map. This is where you go to learn about general programming concepts. And then down here, we have the extension missions in the green VR room. In here, you can learn about Twilio. And these 3 missions not only cover Twilio, but they cover things like web servers and Ngrok. And then we've got the Untitled Forge, which is our challenge mission. This is like for hard JavaScript challenges. But then up here in the nav map, we have a basic introduction to JavaScript with the JavaScript test lab. We have a basic introduction to Python with the Pythonic temple. We have an introduction to open source with Git and GitHub with the forest of open source. We have the API Academy. So if you want a refresher on any of the things we covered today about APIs, check out the API Academy. It is a mission just to teach you about REST APIs. So you can play through this mission and learn about REST APIs. And then we have this new mission, which doesn't have anything in it right now, but does have a very pretty tower. So you can go have a look at that. And every time you complete a challenge in Twilio Quest, every time you complete an objective in Twilio Quest, you will earn your character XP. And that XP, as you can see up here, I've got 200 XP on this character. That XP is what is counted in the leaderboard. So if you play lots of Twilio Quest, you'll earn lots of XP, and then at the end of the week, the top 5 players with the most XP will win Twilio Swag. And we will get in touch and send that out to you, wherever you are in the world. To make sure your XP is counted, you will have to join the leaderboard. As I said, instructions to join the leaderboard are in the GitHub README. I'll link it for like the 20th time. They're in the GitHub README, and you want to, where it says, there we go, where it says join the Twilio Quest operation, you want to make sure that you do this. And once you've done this, your XP, the XP you earn this week will be counted in the leaderboard. And it doesn't matter when you join. So if you play through all of Twilio Quest and on Friday you suddenly realize that you haven't joined the leaderboard yet, that is totally fine. You won't lose your XP. Once you join the leaderboard, it will look at all of the XP you've earned this week, no matter when you join. Yes, Ankit, the code is in here. So I'll link this in particular. And the code is right there. It's birds popular indeed. So the way you join the leaderboard is in your Twilio Quest. You click the settings menu, these three little bars, and you go to operations and you put in birds popular indeed. And then you'll join the operation. And I'll do it just for fun. There we go. And now you see I'm in MLH in at 2022, which, yes, I know it's 2023. I'm really sorry. And then someone asked another question. Citronical, that's an app. Yes, it is an app. I'll link the download again. It's twilio.com Quest. Download. Yep, you grab the app from here. That's where you get the app. And then you can download it on Mac, Windows, Linux, or Raspberry Pi. And the app, as I said, if you've already forgotten everything we covered today, the app will cover a lot of it. The API Academy will cover all of the curl and the API stuff. JavaScript will talk about in JavaScript you'll learn JavaScript as it suggests, and you'll encounter Ngrok in a kind of a similar situation during the Twilio missions as well. So you can go to the API Academy, learn how to use an API. You can go to the JavaScript mission, learn a little bit of JavaScript, and then you can come and do the Twilio Messaging API and the Twilio Voice API missions to learn to use an actual API with JavaScript inside Twilio Quest. You get all the building blocks there, building up to the final thing. Whew, okay, that is everything from me. I'm going to have to stop talking because I'm rapidly losing my voice and there's only a couple minutes left anyway. No, Kratos. To submit, there is a in the challenges page. Under the challenges page, there will be a submission link. So where it says "Get ready to hack with Twilio," this is the stuff. This is the stuff in day one, and at the end there it says "Submit in Dev Post." So you want to go to the challenges page, find the Twilio challenge, and go to the Dev Post link. So this is where you upload the screenshot on this one. Actually, I will add that to. Let's add that to the guide. We'll add it right to the guide so you don't have to go to a different place. Okay. To submit the challenge and submit a screenshot on the Dev Post. There you go. So now the submission link is all in one place. So, yeah, did I just break a heading? No, we're good. There you go. And I'll get the submission links. I'll get the submission links for the other days in here as well, so it's all in one place. So anyway, that is my time. Thank you all so much. You've been wonderful. I hope this has been useful. If you have any questions about our challenges or anything we've covered, come join me in the Twilio channel in the Global Hack Week Discord. I will be there up until Thursday, and then my wonderful colleagues will take over for the rest of the week. But have a very wonderful Global Hack Week. I've been Joe Nash, and enjoy the rest of your week. And I will sit here until the stream disappears. smiling awkwardly.